So there's something I talked about in a video, I think it was a couple weeks ago now. I've talked about it in a few videos. So in this debates issue currently on newsstands around Canada and likely the US as well, the Hockey News has salary cap versus free market. I haven't read through this. I'm following that rule. Let's read it, even though I can barely see in this dingy, dark cavern in which I live. Okay. So Brian Costello writes in favor of the salary cap. Ken Campbell writes in favor of free market. Salary cap. Being a fan of the NHL game in a salary cap environment is akin to the young child who gains an appreciation for the value of money as the teenage years unfold. As a grade schooler, the child wants everything: toys, games, entertainment. Soon enough, it becomes electronic devices, fun vacations, cool clothing. If mom and dad handle things well, that teen becomes aware not everything is free and has to chip in some bucks. Okay, I didn't do that. This magazine is shitting on me as a parent. My kid is spoiled to death. He's everything he wants. Anyways, eventually, he hasn't paid a cent. Eventually, there's talk of a summer job. Nope. Then there's a part-time job after school. No. As that teen approaches 20, the expression fiscal responsibility has entered the lexicon, or at least become a subconscious value. Holy shit, I'm a horrible parent. He's got to get a job today. The gravy train that once offered free rides is pulling into the final station, spewing oil and chugging to a stop. The little one is all grown up. And so it is with the young fan in all of us. Prior to the 04-05 NHL lockout and the pre-salary cap era, we followed our favorite teams like the wide-eyed kids who didn't know a penny from a promissory note. That's bullshit. Every signing their team made was a good one. No. Loading up on free agents was never a bad thing. No. Hello, New York Rangers. It's the owner's money. Fans just want to see good product on the ice. No. Every time free agents got signed, ticket prices went up. But thanks to Gary Bettman's salary cap, we've all become more fiscally responsible. Here's why. Let's take the Edmonton Oilers, for example, but you could pick any of the 30 teams. Before the cap, Edmonton fans would be doing cartwheels after signing of Andrej Sekera and Milan Lucic to big dough contracts the past 2 summers. But now not so much, at least among the hardcore group. Sekera's on the book for 5 years at $5.5 million. Luch is on the boards for 7 years at $6 million. Those signings, with the help of the Oilers' rebuilding plans in the short and midterm, will help the Oilers' rebuilding plans in the short and midterm. But that's what's going to happen when Leon Draisaitl's up for a new contract in 17. Connor McDavid in 18. Puljujarvi in 19. They'll be looking for big money deals as well, but eating up a good chunk of Edmonton's cap will be Sekera when he's 34 and 35, and Lucic when he's 33 and 34. Rest assured, the Draisaitl's, McDavid's, and company will get their money, but the bad money on those expiring contracts will make it difficult for the Oilers to afford quality support players when the team is presumably competitive again. So now. They're competitive now. Essentially, the salary cap era has added another dimension to being a hockey fan. We've always cheered for a team on the ice. Now we cheer for them in the boardroom, too. No. We probably don't know the name of the team's capologist, or care, but we know the job is vital to the operation. It was the same way 53 years ago when the league created the draft, thus doing away with territorial protected lists and became arcane sponsorship agreements with amateur teams. That's not an apt comparison at all. Not in my view, anyways. All of a sudden, scouting became paramount, and teams were hiring and creating talent evaluators by the dozens. Our grandfathers still cheered for their favorite team on the ice, but they also wanted their team to do a good job scouting. But getting back to the impact of the salary cap, we haven't even mentioned the most important point, the fostering of parity. The NHL used to be a league of dynasties. The Canadiens, Islanders, Oilers, in a 15-year window since the mid-70s. Those teams didn't let their stars go because they didn't have to. If you're in a smaller market team like Buffalo, St. Louis, or Washington, you didn't stand a chance. Your Stanley Cup was just making the playoffs. No! No! Yo! No! The salary cap has leveled the playing field, raising the tide and expectations for the smaller market or non-traditional hockey market teams and putting a limit on what the richer teams can spend. I've been over this. I have been over this. If you're not a fan of parity, you think that flies in the face of survival of the fittest motto. If you do think parity is a good thing, you appreciate that at multiple times over a decade there's hope and optimism in every single market. Columbus, Arizona. Up until last year, Florida. Been a lot of teams at or near the bottom of the league for a long time. The rebuilds are not easy. They're not quick. And if you're a team that doesn't spend very much as well, it is very hard to compete. Since the salary cap came on board in 2005, Carolina, Anaheim, and Los Angeles have won their first cups. Boston won their first cup in 39 years. Chicago in 49 years. And no team has won back-to-back titles. No team had won back-to-back titles in like 5 years before the cap either. Having a salary cap in place has forced gyms to be creative and crafty. How fun has it been to watch Chicago Stan Bowman tap dance around the cap while still keeping the Blackhawks competitive? Some good moves, some questionable ones, but all great summer viewing. Bottom line, the salary cap has made the NHL a 12-month sport on and off the ice. Ken Campbell, free market. Way back, 2 lockouts ago, NHL fans went through an entire season without hockey so the billionaires and the millionaires who work for them could figure out a way to bring cost certainty to the sport. And from that crucible came the salary cap. More than 10 years later, it turns out we were all being taken for suckers because the salary cap has done almost nothing to legislate competitive balance. Players are making more money than ever before, and teams have to spend more than their business plans can support just to get to the salary cap floor. And by the end of the season, Chris Pronger will have been paid almost $1.2 million to not play for the Arizona Coyotes and instead have a say in suspending players as an employee of the NHL. When the salary cap came into existence in 2005, it was one of those things that seemed like a very good idea at the time. But like all things, there were unintended consequences. Little did the NHL know at the time that the same teams that needed to be saved from themselves would start finding ways to circumvent the salary cap almost from the day it was established. I said that. I said that. They also didn't foresee that while tying revenues to player salaries seemed logical, rising revenues and the commensurate bump in player salaries might make the macroeconomic picture look rosy, but it's actually counterproductive to teams that still have trouble generating revenues. So here you have teams like the Coyotes, who take advantage of Chris Pronger's backloaded contract. One of the flaws in the system then emerged almost immediately. By paying him a fraction of his salary, but gaining the benefit of having $4.9 million added to their salary cap so they can reach the salary floor, and that's a system that's working? And really, has it given teams the economic disadvantages a chance to win the Stanley Cup? Well, it did in the beginning when the Carolina Hurricanes and Anaheim Ducks won the Cups, despite being at the bottom half of the league in salaries. But it's important to note that was the first 2 years of the salary cap, and the ramifications of it weren't being felt as profoundly as they were later. But in the 9 seasons since then, the Stanley Cup has been won by 5 teams: Detroit Red Wings, Pittsburgh Penguins, Chicago Blackhawks, Boston Bruins, and Los Angeles Kings, with the Penguins, Hawks, and Kings winning multiple cups. None of those teams would ever be confused with one of hockey's have-not teams. The salary cap was supposed to keep the NHL away from its bad old ways when teams could spend as much as they wished on players and chase free agents with ridiculous contracts. Well, the Toronto Maple Leafs blew that out of the water with the David Clarkson deal. It was supposed to level the playing field and keep the same teams from winning over and over again, unlike the 90s when the league went through a 6-year span when a different team won the cup every year. Or like the 90s. You have to go back to the period between 1931 and 36 to find the last time that happened, and it certainly hasn't happened since. I also mentioned that. In fact, you could argue that the salary cap has done almost nothing for the small market teams that struggle and has actually been a big boon to the big spenders and money makers. With a salary cap of $73 million this season and a floor of $54 million, teams that spend to the cap have the luxury of spending almost $1 million more per roster player than teams that spend to the floor. That's a huge advantage. And even though rich teams now contribute to revenue sharing, how much better is their bottom line now that they're saving millions upon millions of dollars in player salaries? Until the league closed the loophole, teams were making the league look silly with backloaded contracts. Now they're picking up dead money and contracts just to prop up their books to get an artificially high salary cap number. The teams that are rich, well-run, and fortunate enough to play in a hockey-mad market are getting richer, and the ones that are poorly operated or playing in non-traditional markets are still largely on the periphery. There are no easy answers, but things are no better now than they were when the teams could spend as little or as much as their budgets allowed. In fact, you could argue they're worse. Yeah. So I'll leave it at that. That's the last argument on the and I've said before, there are teams getting around that cap. That's $73 million. There's teams spending $80 million right now. I went through it on General Fanager site, which is now gone, sadly. But there are teams spending over the cap, and there are teams spending less than the cap floor. So now not only do you have a $19 million gap, it's actually more like a $25 or $30 million gap. And people still want to argue to me, oh no, the cap's done a lot of good. The cap's been fantastic. It hasn't. It hasn't created a competitive balance. The Arizona Ducks. Well, I just moved Arizona to Anaheim, and I kicked Anaheim out. They're going to Seattle. That'll piss people off. But the Arizona/Phoenix Coyotes, Phoenix at the time, were a have-not, and they still are. Carolina was a have-not. They still are. Florida is playing very well, and they're getting good attendance numbers, but they're still in that have-not category. And Tampa, even when they're good, they still give tickets away. The reality of the NHL is this. The rich teams are richer. Look at the amount of money the Toronto Maple Leafs are pocketing every year. They're pocketing crazy amounts of money. Because they don't have to say, oh, we're at the cap. We're at the cap. But those teams that spend to the cap, and I'm talking about Toronto, Vancouver will always be at the cap. Detroit will always be at the cap. Pittsburgh will always be at the cap. I have a feeling Edmonton now with the new arena and McDavid and all this excitement they've created, they're always going to be at the cap now. Which is weird because Edmonton was a have-not. But Edmonton turning into a have is more the new arena and an owner that gives a shit. More than anything else. So that's a good final view on it. And it makes both sides of the point. That's why I think this is a great magazine. It makes both sides of the point. Pro-cap, pro-free market. Look at the teams right now that are doing really well and the teams that are off to slow starts. And then look at their salaries and look at where they're at. Look at Arizona. Arizona's struggling again this year. And how and it's said too, like, when all these contracts are up for Edmonton, what happens to Sekera? Well, somebody will take on Sekera's salary. A Phoenix/Arizona or Carolina or somebody who needs to get to the cap floor will take that salary cap on. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It is a false, and when people say, oh, then teams could spend as much as they wanted, yeah. I remember when Colorado went out and they got Solani in Korea. Oh, they were going to be great. They were going to stomp everybody. They lost. The Rangers signed big-name free agents. Every year, the Rangers spent so much money, and they lost. They couldn't even make the playoffs. Toronto spent all kinds of money. Oh, the Leafs were big spenders. Never got past the second round for the most part. Playoff team? Yes. Contenders? Never. Not really. Even Dallas. Yeah, Dallas won a Stanley Cup in 1999. They spent tons of money. After that cup, they never got close again. Not really. Jersey beat them the year later in the cup final, but that final was it was a smothered final by Jersey. It was theirs from game one. And yeah, we went through, let's see, 94 was the Rangers. Wait, 93 was Montreal. 94 was the Rangers, which were the Edmonton Oilers moved to New York. 95 was New Jersey, who was not a big spender. 96 was Colorado, thanks to Patrick Roy. 97 was Detroit. And then 98 was Detroit as well. And then 99 was Dallas. 2000 was New Jersey. So the Dynasties thing? Yeah, the Dynasties thing ended in 1990. The last Oilers Stanley Cup, that was the end of Dynasties in the NHL. That's a long time before the salary cap came in. A long time before. So anyways, my opinion's out there. I am sure you will have opinions as well. That's how this whole thing works. And of course, as always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit unlike when you disagree with me, because that's important, I guess. But yeah, I've mentioned recently that I think the free market was fine. And at the time I supported the cap coming in, but it really hasn't made things better. Not really. You know, the organizations that struggle are still struggling. Thrashers had to move to Winnipeg. That move probably happens faster without a salary cap. So, anyways, thanks for watching. I will talk to y'all again really soon. And may all of your hockey games end the way you want them to. Although if you're a fan in various markets, they probably won't. I'm not saying which markets those are, because I know better than to say which markets those are. I'm smarter than that. But these guys got shut out last night by Ottawa at home, and that's a team that they'd beaten 8 of the last 9 times they were in Vancouver. And that's the Vancouver Canucks that I saw last year that couldn't score goals to save their lives, and that has nothing to do with the salary cap. So we'll just forget I said that. We'll just forget I said it. Just as one of those things. Just anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to y'all again soon.